Hey, beautifuls. Sorry it took so long. This is part two of my testimony. I think I left off, and I am in my office again. I left off where I had my youngest daughter, who is now 26. um, I stayed clean with her um, for about 4.5 years. I had her, because I was pregnant. I found out I was getting so high so often that I didn't even realize that I was pregnant. And God had said you cannot abort this child. I have had one abortion one time. Um, when my oldest daughter was 2 years old, I was in school, trying to finish my high school diploma. I was still really, really young. I was two, she was two, and I was catching like 6 buses a day, from the suburbs to the hood to finish school. I just couldn't do it. And so I, had an abortion, and I regretted that for many years. And I do know that he was a little boy. I'm super intuitive, so I have met him in my dreams and apologized to my son. Um, I stayed clean till my daughter was about 4.5. I worked the program because I am a member of Narcotics Anonymous proudly. I worked the program first couple of years. Um, 'Cause, I was in treatment and all that good stuff. So I worked the program for a little while. And then when that program ended, I still stayed clean because I had built up a support system. But, you know, I started kind of veering off and veering away from that support system. And it was a slow process, but I would say about 2 years in, so I had about 4.5 years clean. I started doing things that a person in recovery from substance use disorder ain't got no business doing. Like, you ain't got no business hanging out at the clubs, going to bars and not drinking and all of that. So I started kicking it and partying all the time. And sooner or later, I ended up using. And I'm the type of person, when I use, it's serious. Everything I do 180%. And so I lost everything. I lost my car, my jewelry, everything I had that I placed value in at that time, I lost, including my daughter. And I already did not have parental rights of my 8-year-old daughter. So my life was a mess. It was a mess. My sister graciously took my daughter, my youngest daughter, and I went out there and was out there for about 6 more months out in the streets using, and I got clean again. The miracle in that part is that the apartment complex that I lived in had a special program, and it was like run by a Catholic organization. And then another program called, I want to say Project Self-Sufficiency or something like that, was created in the time that I was out on my relapse. And so I actually received a call from the apartment manager saying, hey, we want you to come back, even though I had formally, been evicted. And they said, we want you to come back. There's another program you can go into. You need to come home. Everybody deserves another chance, a second. What she said verbatim was, everybody deserves a second chance. Well, I'm here to tell you that God is not a God of second chances. He's a God of next chances, most of the time. And so I went back. And I stayed in the same complex in just a different apartment. It was the same big big, beautiful, like 2,000 square feet or 1,000 square. It was huge. The apartments were huge. And, I didn't stay clean for very long because I was doing a program, but I really wasn't. My heart was not in it. And I lost my daughter again. And God has always been there in the center of my life. Always. Right before I lost her, social services actually, they came to me and they were like, if you don't find somewhere to go, we'll place her for you. And I didn't want her with strangers. I knew that would not be good. I would lose my mind. It would either drive me to the abyss of my addiction, which I've been there several times, or it would, snap me out of it. But God is so good that her daycare worker, she had a daycare worker. We had a daycare on site that we used. And the woman that had been her daycare worker since she started going to daycare at 1, she was now 5.5, remained her daycare teacher. And she became compelled to become a foster parent. When she got her certification, about a month later, I needed to place my daughter. And so I called her up and she just came. She lived down the street. She came right and got her. That served to my sanity, but it didn't serve my addiction, if that makes sense. I knew she was safe, loved, and cared for. So, I just was like, well, she's safe. I'm just going to go out here and do my thing. And 2 years went by. I showed up for my visits. I showed up to see her. But it broke her little heart. It broke her heart. And it still breaks mine. 2 years had passed and I finally got clean. And that's when I ended up at a shelter for women, which I'm still involved with to this day in a different capacity. And I went to that shelter. They gave me my daughter back while I was there. And I ended up doing better. I ended up becoming heavily involved with the shelter, and God started, working miracles. I needed to, that's where I really got to know God. That's it. I know him real well now, but, I started to work, and I would work for the shelter too, as well. And I got placed in some housing, yet still was not working a well-rounded program. I've tried church. I've tried doing this, doing that, and none of it, doing it by itself, has ever worked for me. It's always had to be several different healing modalities that I have to use simultaneously to stay growing and prospering and in recovery. I've been through hell and back. And so, I stayed clean another 4.5 years. I never could seem, except this time around, to make it past to that 5-year point. I could never make it to the 5-year mark. And I started using again around 2006 or so, 7, something like that. And I did not make it back to my program for 6 years. That's a long time. I had some bouts of clean time. I would go and stay with my sister. My sister is a medical professional. She's taken up the slack for me and my oldest daughter, right? Like, she's had my daughter, my grandsons. The disease of addiction is truly a family disease. It affects everyone around you. And whether you know it or not, you know what I mean? It affects everybody else. And they need to get help in healing just as much as you do, whatever healing modality that is that they're going to use. And I ended up relapsing and just abandoning my children because of my disease. And my sister took my daughter, my youngest daughter, and she pretty much she did have her until adulthood. That is still a strained relationship. My oldest daughter, we talk all the time, all the time. We hang out. There's still some healing that needs to be done there. But, my daughters are like polar opposites at opposite ends of the spectrum. One would always come looking for me, whether I was using or clean. She was always, "Where's my mama? What's my mama doing?" And the other one just shuts down and won't talk to me. That's how it looks sometimes. Sometimes it takes a long time to bring about the healing, and sometimes not so much. When I would get clean for small amounts of time, like 8, 9 months, a year, I would go and live with my sister in the greater Seattle area. But I still wasn't working a program. Some kind of healing modality. I was, just kind of white knuckling it. And you can stay clean during that, but you won't recover, at least in my humble opinion. My romantic relationships have always been toxic and abusive. And that's a cycle I'm just now breaking in my life. Yeah. So I've moved to Georgia to try to get clean and stay clean. That didn't last very long. In 2008, I met a man. And I thought he was the one, you guys. I did. I thought he was the one. It was not long after my relapse had begun and gotten pretty deep. And he is what I now know to be a karmic relationship. But it was a very spiritual relationship. We were very, very connected. We could tap into each other's energy. He was the only guy I ever got into a relationship with when I was in my active addiction. That was something I was always pretty good at, was not getting into romantic relationships and not, something official or, yeah, this is my man or whatever. I wasn't, my addiction got all my attention. My alcohol, my crack, my weed, whatever you had that was free or whatever you had, that was where my attention was going. I didn't have time for a man on a full-time basis. And so, very spiritual relationship. Able to tap into each other's energy, telepathy. I thought he was it. And we weren't even really together that long, but he stayed in my energy field for a really long time. Took me a while to get rid of him, really. Just up until actually maybe about a year ago. He would still contact me like once a year, once every year and a half. Abusers always come back. That's something I want y'all to know. Maybe 6 months, maybe a year. Some I've seen come back 20 years later. They always come back to try you. Always. So I went on in that relationship for just a little while, and then God was like, yeah, I'm not having that one. I've always been the type of person to hold on to something God is trying to rip away from me, because I was going to fix it. I was going to make it better. I was going to change it. I was going to change them. It don't happen like that. And so I went on for a few years in my addiction, 6 years, off and on, running from the healing, running from the work, running from the healing, and it just doesn't work. Jails, institutions, and death is the end result if you continue to run from your healing, because it is a lot of work and it's painful. Where am I? I am up to about 2012. So yeah, I'm gonna stop part 2 of my testimony here. And part 3, I don't know how many parts I'm going to make this. Maybe 3, maybe 4, maybe 5. 5 parts. 5-part series, yes. 5 is the number of change, so we're going to make this a 5-part thing. Please like, share, subscribe. Heal, most importantly, from whatever it is you hear that triggers your healing. That's what's most important to me. I don't care if it gets one view. If that one viewer gets the inclination to change something in their life, then I have done my job. I love you all so much. I know most for right now, the people that I know will watch this know that I loved you, and I love you still, and you are an inspiration to me to keep me clean on a daily basis, one day at a time. See you guys next week.